Alito disrespected President Obama again during a 2010 State of the Union address after the president correctly criticized the Citizens United decision that kicked open the floodgates to billionaires like Leonard Leo and Alito and Clarence Thomas's benefactors to buy up politics and apparently our courts. Then there was that time, months after he penned the Dobbs decision overturning Roe, when Alito attended an event in Rome and complained about the rise in secularism. Unprompted, he went on to complain that world leaders dared to question his ruling.
I had the honor this term of writing, I think, the only Supreme Court decision in the history of that institution that has been lambasted by a whole string of foreign leaders who felt perfectly fine commenting on American law. One of these was former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but he paid the price. All I am going to say is that ultimately, if we are going to win the battle to protect religious freedom in an increasingly secular society, we will need more than positive law.
He added that if religious liberty is protected, then men and women of faith will be able to speak out on social issues, which is exactly what he's been doing. And while he likes speaking up, he doesn't like being called out. Alito posted an unprecedented rebuke of ProPublica in the Rupert Murdoch-owned Wall Street Journal before ProPublica posted a stunning report that he had accepted a luxury fishing trip from Republican megadonor Paul Singer, who had active cases in front of the Supreme Court. And that's all before the upside-down flag, the upside-down American flag, I should note, and the Jesus at the Insurrection flag flew at his homes. And also, that's just the stuff Sam Alito has been saying in public, which kind of makes you wonder what he's been saying behind closed doors. Well, there is blockbuster new audio today that gives us some insight into that. It comes from progressive activist and documentarian Lauren Windsor. Ms. Windsor, who is known for approaching high-profile conservative figures, pretending to be an ally, and then recording them making candid comments, spoke to Justice Alito at the Supreme Court Historical Society's annual dinner earlier this month, where she asked him about political polarization.
As a Catholic and as someone who really cherishes my faith, I don't know that we can negotiate with the left in the way that needs to happen for the polarization to end. I think that it's a matter of winning.
I think you're probably right. I think one side or the other is going to win. I don't know. I mean, there can be a way of working, a way of living together peacefully, but it's difficult, because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised. They really can't be compromised. So it's not like we're going to split the difference.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that the solution really is winning the moral argument. People in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
And just to underscore how unusual that kind of response is from a Supreme Court justice, here is Chief Justice John Roberts after being asked a similar question by Ms. Windsor.
You don't think there's a role for the court in guiding us toward a more moral path?
No, I think the role for the court is deciding the cases. If I start, would you want me to be in charge of guiding us toward a more moral path? That's for the people we elect. That's not for lawyers.
Well, I guess I believe that the founders who are godly, we're Christians, and right. I think that we live in a Christian nation, and that our Supreme Court should be guiding us in that path.
Yeah, I don't know that we live in a Christian nation. I know a lot of Jewish and Muslim friends who would say maybe not. And it's not our job to do that. It's our job to decide the cases as best we can.
Joining me now is the creator and executive producer of The Undercurrent, Lauren Windsor, whose voice you just heard in those secret recordings. We should also note that Lauren attended this dinner as a dues-paying member of the society under her real name. Lauren, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Joy.
Welcome back to the show. One side or the other is going to win. It's not like we can split the difference. These are shocking comments. But before I get to how you reacted, how you internally reacted to them, I do want to just underscore that. How did you get into this event?
I was a dues-paying member. I bought a ticket.
Were you surprised? Because there's another part of your recording where you say, hey, I talked to you in 2022. But Alito kept talking. He didn't seem he seemed undeterred by the fact that you're someone he doesn't know personally, and he was willing to say a lot to you.
Well, so it was 2023, and I included both of the interactions there just so people could see that, you know, I think some of the criticism is, oh, well, he was just agreeing with you or whatnot. But look at his answer in 2023. It was different. It was, no, we don't have a role. I don't know. I don't know. And it was also contrasted to Robert's answer.
Let me play that. This is Justice Alito in 2023 also talking to you, Lauren Windsor, and talking about the media. Take a listen.
Like, this was like the last bastion of, I think, like, public trust. And, like, how do we get back to that?
I wish I knew. I don't know. It's easy to blame the media, but I do blame them because they do nothing but criticize us. And so they have really eroded trust in the court. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, ordinary people, ordinary isn't the right word. American citizens in general need to work on this to try to heal this polarization because it's very dangerous. I do believe it's very dangerous.
So he had a very different answer back then. Were you surprised at how candid he was about saying one side or the other is going to win? It's not like we can split the difference. He's essentially saying he's agreeing. Yes, we need to win this culture war.
Yes, of course. I mean, when the first interaction happened, I was like, okay, well, it's very hard to get a justice, even lower level judges to talk about politics, anything that might imply politics, to give any sort of hint or signal as to what their own opinions may be. And so after that first interaction, I didn't publish it because it wasn't very newsworthy.
Yeah.
Interesting, but not newsworthy. But I felt like in the course of the last year, because that was before the spotlight was on him with ProPublica.
Sure.
So I felt like that grievance was more peaked over the past year with his own experience. And so I wanted to see if he had a different reaction.
And he certainly did. Let's talk about Martha Ann. Justice Alito has blamed Martha Ann, his wife, and said it is her flag. She's the one who flew them. It's her fault that there was an upside-down American flag and then a, consent to Jesus or embrace appeal to heaven flag outside their vacation home. Let me play for you, and this is new audio. It just recently went up on your social media and on Rolling Stone. Here is Martha Ann Alito, and you go up to her and you start by saying, hey, I'm a big fan of your husband, and let's hear what happens after that.
I'm a huge fan of your husband, and everything that you're going through, I just want to tell you that, like,
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's not okay, though. It's not okay.
It's okay. It's okay because if they come back to me, I'll get them. I'm going to be liberated, and I'm going to
What do you mean by
Oh, well,
gay?
there's a 5-year defamation statute of limitations.
But I don't know what you mean by gay, like, yeah. Oh, okay.
Come on, I'll get you. Come on.
I'm normally not speechless. I'll get them. I'm going to get them. I'll be liberated, and I'm going to get them. She talks about a 5-year defamation statute of limitations. We know that there are conservative legal groups who would like to allow the media to be sued for defamation. Donald Trump talks about it all the time. Do you think that's what she was talking about?
Well, I certainly feel like, yeah, she would like to go after the media, but the implication here with a 5-year statute of limitations is that Justice Alito will be retired by then. And he would only retire
if there's a conservative.
If Trump were in the White House again. Sure. So there's an assumption there that Trump wins the White House. And so that adds an additional layer of self-interest to all of these decisions that he's deciding, because he's thinking about impending retirement.
Sure.
amongst other things.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that the moment Donald Trump is inaugurated, they'll retire probably a day after that. There's another piece, and this one is even more bizarre, but I think also more relevant, since she is the one who Samuel Alito blamed for the various flags that flew both at their home and their vacation home. Here is Martha Ann Alito talking about flags. Take a listen.
You know what I want? I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag, because I have to look across the lagoon at the Pride flag for the next month.
Exactly.
And he's like, oh, please don't put up a flag. I said, I won't do it because I'm deferring to you. But when you are free of this nonsense, I'm putting it up, and I'm going to send them a message every day. Maybe every week I'll be changing the flags. There'll be all kinds. I made a flag in my head. This is how I satisfy myself. I made a flag. It's white, and it's yellow and orange flames around it. And in the middle is the word vergogna. Vergogna in Italian means shame.
Vergogna. For those of you who did not hear that clearly, I'm just going to reread this to you because I think you need to understand what she said. This is Mrs. Samuel Alito. You know what I want? I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag because I have to look across the lagoon at the Pride flag for the next month. Then she says, oh, please don't put up a flag. He's like, she means Samuel Alito, oh, please don't put up a flag. She said, I won't do it because I'm deferring to you. But when you are free of this nonsense, I'm putting it up and I'm going to send them a message every day. Maybe every week I'll be changing the flags. There'll be all kinds. I made a flag in my head. That's how I satisfy myself. I made a flag. It's white and it has yellow and orange flames around it. And in the middle of it is the word vergogna. Vergogna. And she emphasized that as an Italian word that means shame. What were your immediate thoughts after hearing that?
Well, throughout this sort of rant, there was a lot of, just aggression and, against the media, getting even. And it felt like, another instance of getting even, shame. And at one point she talked about being German, and I really had more of the impression that she was Italian by the way that she was talking about everything.
From Begonia.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
And she said, I'm German, and you just can't believe how much I can come at you and give more revenge. Begonia. Lauren Windsor, congratulations. This is a huge scoop, perhaps your biggest yet. Thank you for bringing it to the readout. Much appreciated.
As a Catholic and as someone who really cherishes my faith, I don't know that we can negotiate with the left in the way that needs to happen for the polarization to end. I think that it's a matter of winning.
I think you're probably right. I think one side or the other is going to win.
The man you just heard on that tape, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, has become one of the most strident political voices on the country's highest court. And before this latest court session is over, there are still a number of key decisions with far-reaching implications that Justice Alito will weigh in on, from abortion to guns to President Trump's absurd immunity claim. And joining me now is Barbara McQuade, a former U.S. attorney, professor at the University of Michigan Law School and an MSNBC legal analyst, and Melissa Murray, NYU professor and MSNBC legal analyst. I want to let you both react to that, but I want to start with you, Melissa, and also react to it and also imagine for a moment what the reaction would be if the justice that you clerked for, Sonia Sotomayor, had said something similar on the other side.
Well, so first of all, I thought Lauren did a great job getting this footage. It was alarming, but certainly not surprising. I think anyone who's been reading Justice Alito's writings would not be surprised by some of the things that he has said. I think what was surprising was that he felt so free to be clear about his desire to return the country to a state of Christian nationalism, if you will, and his sense that his moral view of the universe is the one that should hold sway. And, your question is certainly a rhetorical one, a provocative one to some degree, but we all know that if Justice Sotomayor was overheard saying things like this in a recorded conversation, there would be calls for her impeachment from the bench. And those calls would likely be from both sides of the aisle. And that's what's missing today. We have plenty of Democrats saying that this is alarming and wrong, but we have no Republicans with the courage to stand up and say that this puts the court in a really terrible light.
Right. And Barb, it feels like Alito is unconstrained at this point. He doesn't care who knows that he wants to make the country into a Christian nationalist, ethno state or whatever it is he thinks that he would create under this Handmaid's Tale vision. He doesn't care if people know that he takes lavish vacations. He and Roberts don't care. And the right doesn't care. They care more about Ketanji Brown Jackson getting Beyonce tickets than they do about Clarence Thomas getting $4 million in lucre. They don't care. And so what does it mean for us that we know Alito is essentially a Fox host on the court?
Well, I think it's one of the reasons that the court finds itself in the state it's in today when public opinion of the court is at an all-time low. In the research for my book, Attack from Within, one of the things I looked into was healthy democracies and unhealthy democracies. And one of the hallmarks of a healthy democracy is something that's referred to as mutual tolerance and forbearance. And some of what that means is that you respect your political rivals. You respect the idea that other Americans have views that are different from yours, and that you forbear from using power just because you can. Let's not forget that all these cases that come before the court are cases they select. So it's not a coincidence that they are deciding cases that address abortion or religious liberty or guns. These are cases that justices are choosing to decide. If they wanted to exercise forbearance, they could simply allow precedent to stand. And that overreach, I think, is what is causing so much problems with the public confidence in the court today.
Right. And Melissa, I mean, just in reading through the litany of things that Alito has said in the past, he's criticized the Warren Court. That's the court that gave us all of the sort of the civil rights that women, people of color, immigrants, everything, that the disabled, all of that came in the 20th century. You've now had Clarence Thomas question whether Brown v. Board went too far. This just tells me they're going to take a case to overturn Brown v. Board. So what should we be expecting? We know we have decisions coming Thursday and Friday. My assumption is they make mifepristone illegal and they give Trump absolute immunity. That's just my guess, because now Alito is telling us that's the plan.
Well, let's put some money on it, Joy. I actually don't think the court is going to find that the FDA's regulation of mifepristone was improper. I think they're going to punt that case on standing ground for lack of jurisdiction. But at oral argument, we heard Justices Thomas and Alito both inviting new litigants to bring a better case before the court, a case with better litigants who are more clearly able to show an actual constitutional injury and therefore have jurisdiction. So they're waiting for a better case because they know this case is probably not the one. But there's still also the question of Moyle versus United States. That's a case involving EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, and whether or not that act, which requires hospitals receiving federal funds, which is a lot of hospitals that take Medicare and Medicaid, whether they are required to provide stabilizing care to all patients, even if that care requires an abortion and if it conflicts with state law. And in this case, it conflicts with an Idaho state law. I think that's where we're going to see Justice Alito's moral vision of the universe really come into sway. And there are a lot of other cases. I don't know if the court is likely to take a case that would overrule Brown versus Board of Education or even Obergefell versus Hodges, the case that granted gay marriage. But that doesn't mean that this court can't incrementally expand the Overton window of what is possible and what is not possible in the short time that it has here. And so I think we're seeing that already. This court is moving steadily to the right. And even when it punts something on jurisdiction, it's still doing a lot of work to push this court in a rightward direction and push this country in a rightward direction. And we have to keep our eyes on all of the balls.
And push this country in a rightward direction against the will of the majority of the people in this country. Barb, we now face a situation where I have to say on the television that the former president of the United States and an aspirant to be president again met with his parole officer today. What does that mean for our republic, and what does that normally entail for a felon like him?
This is a routine interview that occurs after every conviction, whether it is by guilty plea or conviction after a jury trial. And this is where a probation officer, who is an employee of the court, works for the judge, will ask a series of questions and prepare a report to the judge with recommendations. And don't be fooled by the name probation officer, because it doesn't mean that they are necessarily recommending probation. But they will ask a number of questions that they will then go verify about employment history, substance abuse, addiction, problems in childhood, problems in schooling, good things and bad things about the character of the offender. And all of that will end up in a very detailed report that the judge will have when he decides to impose sentence, so that he has at his fingertips every detail about Donald Trump's life.
Well, I hope that the probation officer doesn't read Mary Trump's book, because she might put an ankle bracelet on him on the spot. Barbara McQuade and Melissa Murray, thank you both very much.